Good day, poker people. My name is Sky with Smart Poker Study, and I'm here with another training video today. Today's video is about the four factors that every beginning player must think about before they enter that hand pre-flop. Alrighty, what poker beginners must think about pre-flop? So there are a few factors that you must consider before you enter that hand pre-flop right here. And today we are definitely going to keep it simple, and I love the idea of KISS, keep it simple stupid. It's one of my favorite concepts. And it's really applicable here, especially for beginners, because in poker, there are so many things that you can think about before you enter a pre-flop pot. But we're going to hit the four most important considerations before any single hand. Now, the first one is your relative position. Are you going to be in position or out of position post-flop? The second factor are your likely opponents. Now, you want to think about who is still to act and what will they do after you make your action. And you also want to think about who is likely to see the flop with you. The third factor is the pot size. Now, will the pot be so big that your short-stacked opponents will be committed? This often happens when people start the hand at like sub 30 big blinds, which is, late stage tournament action, or of course, cash games when you have some short stacked players playing right here. Now, the fourth factor is how your range compares to that of your opponents. So the person who raises has the stronger range. All the callers have weaker ranges because if they had aces or kings or maybe even ace, king, queens, and jacks, they very likely would have 3-bet you pre-flop, right? Not always, but quite often. So when you're considering whether or not to enter the pot, you need to ask and answer this question. What situation am I likely to see on the flop? Now, your answer should definitely include those four factors we discussed: position, opponents, pot size, and ranges, of course. Now, at first, your answers will not be great. If you're a poker beginner, if you never thought about this kind of stuff before, how can your answers be great, right? Like I said, there are so many freaking things to consider. But over time, your answers are going to get better and better. They'll end up being more logical and more reasoned just due to all of your experience and asking yourself these questions, studying things off the felt. Basically, over time, you get better and better. Plus, just over time, you'll start to consider more factors. Maybe things like the exact stack sizes of your opponent, your image, their image, bet sizing, future boards, like what can come on the flop, the turn, the river. You'll also think about possible flop actions. I can check raise here, I can donk lead, I can float on the flop, all that kind of stuff. So let's go through an example hand right here. In this situation, you are in the cutoff, villain 10 folded to you right there. You have queen jack suited. You're considering an open raise 2-3 big blinds. Let's look at the rest of the table here. On the button is a nit. In the big blind is a nit. Now, nits just means they're very tight players and they fold quite a bit unless they have a really strong hand. Now, the small blind is a passive player, which of course means they just like calling, they like seeing flops, they're hard to bluff, but they're pretty easy to get value from quite often, right? Now, you're considering that 3 big blind open raise. We want to ask this question: what situation am I likely to face on the flop? And remember, we want to factor in the 4 factors: position, opponents, pot size, and range. So here is a potential answer to this question. I will be in position on the flop versus a weak passive player with a deep enough stack to get good value out of my stronger range and decent holding. So this reasoning right here is completely logical, makes total sense. It takes into account position, opponents, pot size, and ranges, of course. So I would say that this answer, like I just said, is totally fine, and it's a really good opportunity to make that 3 big blind open raise. Right now, this is a pot, as a beginner, you definitely want to jump into. Now, let's look at a second example here. It's basically the same situation. You're in the cutoff with queen jack suited. You're thinking about that 3 big blind open raise. But now let's look at our opponents. We have all 3 passive players, which means after that first passive player calls, that pot is a little bit bigger. The second passive player in the small blind is going to call. After they call, the third passive player in the big blind is likely to call, right? So if we do open raise to 3 big blinds here, it's very likely we're going to go to the flop with all 4 players. And you can also see the button has only 60 big blinds, or a $6 stack, 60 big blinds. The small blind has only 38 big blinds. So we've got a couple of short stackers here, so that could be a possible issue, further on down the line in the hand. So let's look at the question again. What situation am I likely to face on the flop? And the 4 factors, of course. Now, here is our answer. I will be in the middle of 3 weak passive players with short stacks. It's going to be hard to bluff these 3 off on the flop, so I might end up just folding with this speculative hand if I hit absolutely nothing. Now, this answer makes total sense. Because of this, you might decide to raise bigger to 3.5 or even 4 big blinds. Or you might just fold to watch the action and learn more about how these passive players play their hands. Now, here were your 2 decisions, right? You can raise bigger or you can open fold. The thing with this is either choice is absolutely fine. What matters is that you analyzed the situation and you made a play based on that analysis, right? Now, the more you do this, the better your pre-flop decisions are going to be. Practice, of course, just equals improvement. And with better pre-flop decisions, you'll be setting yourself up for more post-flop success. Now, I always like to give you ways that you can play with purpose and study with purpose, so we'll hit those now. In your next 3 play sessions, you want to ask and answer this question before every pre-flop button click. And I'm sure you already know that question because we've said it so many times. What situation am I likely to see on the flop? You're going to answer with these 4 factors in mind. Again, your relative position, the likely opponents, the pot size, and how your range compares. And this is important. Tag every hand so that you can review them later on. Now, the hands that you're going to tag, maybe not tag every single hand, but you want to tag the hands that you're unsure of what the best play is. You also want to tag the hands where you find maybe just the situation is interesting. It's something you hadn't seen before. It's something you didn't consider before. And you also want to tag hands where you thought you should fold, but you called or raised instead, right? Maybe you're trying to break some bad habits of yours, and you always like to call with Jack-8 suited. You know you shouldn't, but you do it anyway. Tag those hands for a later review so you can try to break those bad habits and learn from your mistakes. Now, study with purpose. Review every tagged hand in your next study session and answer that question again. Remember, what situation am I likely to see on the flop? But make sure you take a little bit more time to consider those 4 factors to see if it really is a situation that you want to jump into. And lastly, write a sticky note for yourself, and I'm sure you can guess what is on the sticky note. What situation am I likely to see on the flop? Put it, attach it to your computer, stick it on your keyboard, whatever you need to kind of see it as you're playing, to remind yourself to stay focused on this question and answering it every single time. Well, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and ding that bell so you get notified of every single new YouTube video that hits the airwaves. I really do appreciate. If you have any questions, oh yeah, by the way, this video is in response to somebody's question that they emailed me. So if you have a question, I just may create a video response to the question in the future. So, my email is sky@smartpokerstudy.com. Peace out.